I worked harder than, I mean, I don't want to say harder than anyone. They all worked really hard. It just, what took them an hour took me 3 hours for a lot of the same results, or maybe not the same results, but it took time. It took a huge amount of time. And there were many times every single semester where it was, why the hell do I have to do so much more? So much more than everyone else. Ultimately, it slowly just became my process. It just kind of became like second nature. It's just what I did to get through. And I don't say this to be boastful. It was more like humor. Like my mom and I just kept laughing. I graduated Phi Beta Kappa and we just laughed our asses off at graduation.
This is Megan, owner of Dyslexia On Demand.
And I'm Eryn, owner of Advocate to Educate.
And we are the Don't Call on Me podcast.
We are here to talk about dyslexia, to remove the stigma, to hear what families really go through, and to share their stories.
In both of our businesses and personal experiences on a daily basis, we listen to people telling their stories. Many of heartbreak, many of struggle, but most all have a silver lining, even eventually.
It's all about the stories. The more we share, the more we realize we aren't alone and we are a community. No, a tribe standing together. The Don't Call on Me podcast is brought to you by Dyslexia On Demand and Advocate to Educate. Welcome back, listeners. We have Lainie Donnell. Lainie, can you introduce yourself and just let us know where you're currently living and what you're currently doing in life?
Sure. So I'm Lainie Donnell. I am in Thousand Oaks, California, kind of halfway between Los Angeles and Santa Barbara. I work as an educational therapist and college counselor, mainly work with, I say middle, high school, and college, but sometimes I'll go so far as to get to fifth grade, sometimes fourth grade if it's a friend's child and I see that I could help in some way, shape, or form. And yeah, I've been doing this in Thousand Oaks for the last 16 years. And prior to that, I was based in Sherman Oaks in LA, more LA area. And I worked at a non-public school as a teacher for students with mild to moderate disabilities.
Okay, so today, Lainie, it's all about you. So we want our listeners to hear stories of the journey of being dyslexic and how that looks in everyday life and talk about the experience and the feelings around it. So we'd love to hear your story. And
Okay.
if you can kind of go back in time and let's talk about what your schooling was like and kind of what your journey was early in elementary school with your disabilities.
I was diagnosed in second grade, actually, which was very rare for me. I'm 47 years old, so my mom was very progressive and aggressive in trying to get me help. She always says that there was this she saw how bright I was, but then, we know that when kids get to school, aside from their parents, their first sense of self-esteem and achievement and getting their gold stars or stickers on their papers, et cetera, et cetera. And I wasn't getting that. There was just a complete disconnect, even though she knew I was bright, I was engaged. And so by second grade, there already started the school refusal and the stomach aches and the avoidance and all of that. So she had me tested. It came back that had a reading delay, auditory and visual processing delay, a delay and what it says in the paper in my original report is deficit in numerical reasoning and number sense. I couldn't make the connection between sound and symbol. I couldn't keep up. And I had things to say, but it all just went too fast for me. And so I was often kind of, sectioned off. I remember very clearly in second and third grade, just feeling very, very small and just incapable. There was intervention. I had what we now is an ed therapist. I don't know if she was called an educational therapist at that time necessarily, but Beverly was like my savior. And I would go to Beverly twice a week and she would try and put band-aids on all the little things while also, and she was trying to help me with homework and all the things while also just trying to get some basic reading skills in there. But, 2 hours a week versus all the hours that you're in school.
Mm-hmm.
I know you guys know it's very
Mhm.
hard to have that like balance between how do we teach her to compensate for what's going on and how do we actually start to try and fill the gaps and push her up a little bit, right? I remember specifically that there was this woman who I think she must have been OT, like occupational therapy or something, but I remember her pulling me and going to this like little like a
Yeah.
portable on
Mhm.
campus, and we would go and we would do some reading instruction and I would walk on a balance beam. Her name was Donna, and she was also one of the PE teachers. In retrospect, it was grasping at straws. It was,
Mhm.
and it was I was at a very progressive private school. And so we got to fourth grade and the gaps were just vast. I felt smart. I didn't feel like I was an idiot, but nothing I did in school like showed that I was smart. And
Mhm.
so there was always this disconnect, and I was always like a little bit confused. I guess the difference would be like achievement and intellect. Like I
Right.
couldn't achieve, but I had the intellect. And inside I felt that, but because I couldn't achieve, I started to internalize that like, all right, well, I guess I just can't. And then socially, I felt really disconnected. I felt like I didn't have friends. I felt like I couldn't connect with people. I felt like I was always being left out. Going to school was like hell. I would leave class and I remember I would just be like flicking off the
Oh.
courtyard and being like, I hate you. And, like I
Oh.
was like learning all of that in fourth grade. And I would go to the nurse's office constantly. Nurse Barbara was like my bestie. That was my refuge, or I would hide in the bathroom. Or again, there was a lot of school refusal, just not wanting to face what I had to face. Students know, like you can have the nicest teachers and the loveliest environment, but like when you are different than the majority of the students around you. You know.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
whether a parent talks about it or doesn't talk about it, it is very obvious to the student what they are struggling with. And I
Mm-hmm.
give a lot of credit to my parents, specifically my mom, who just brought it all into the open and
Yeah.
had
Mhm.
conversations and was like, let's get you tested. Let's get you help. And then the diagnoses and the labels, like it was just part of the conversation at home. So it never occurred to me to like not have it be part of a conversation once I understood what was going on with me.
Are either of your parents dyslexic?
My mom is. As soon as I was diagnosed, she went, oh,
Yeah.
that's why I couldn't do school. So at the end of that fourth grade year, my school asked me to leave. They said that they couldn't help me and they told my parents that I needed to leave. That was like, whoa. And my mom was like, where am I supposed to go? So she investigated putting me into public and to get
Mhm.
me an IEP and all of that. But at that time, you had to fail for 3 years consecutively, essentially. She's like, my kid doesn't have 3 more years to lose. She's already in fourth grade. And
Right.
so she's like, I can't put her in private school and get the IEP because it's not going to happen in enough time.
Right.
So at that time, Landmark, she had heard about this school that had just come a few years before from the East Coast, and created a campus in Culver City on one of the public schools that wasn't being used. And it was called Landmark West. And so Landmark West had just been started. And my mom was like, we're going to go. And so she takes me to Landmark and I interview, I have all, my testing, etc. And we decide that that's what I'm going to do. And it was a school for kids with learning disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And the classes were no more than 10 people. And all the teachers at that time had special ed credentials. It was interesting, though, to be in a segregated setting because on one hand, I was finally with all these people who were in the same boat. So it was hard. And there was this culture of like, I don't want to say misfits, but like a little bit of like, we're the special ones. Like you know what I mean? Like we would constantly call ourselves the R word and like,
Oh,
oh, constantly. We just, because we had all been kind of taken out of the general ed setting and now we're in this special school. In fact, the buses were literally the short buses,
they were
which yes, we
even in
had
this private setting.
yes, well, it's a non-public setting. So some people had to take the bus because it was an NPS.
For the listeners to understand this, today in 2025, a non-public school in California is an alternate placement when you're in public school and they have kind of maxed out what they're capable of giving you. And a lot of people look at it like, unfortunately, like, what, you're giving up? There's nothing more you can do when from the public school side. But really, it's that they have maxed out all that they can do, and what the child needs as far as either direct intervention is going to take up 50% of the school day. And so they're not capable of
Right.
then also modifying or accommodating the rest of the day to meet their needs. And that's more LD profile. It could be
Yeah.
if a child that's medically complex needs a smaller setting, all that stuff. So some NPSs are also private. They have their NPS status.
What I'm seeing now with NPSs is that because of the push for inclusion with the lack of actual training, there's so few of them now. And so schools will not pay for them, even though it's part of the offer of FAPE. It's right in the middle of least restrictive environment. So it's not most restrictive. It's not hospital setting. It's certainly not the general ed classroom. It's like smack in the middle. But there's so few actually fund them. These NPSs are struggling. And I think I understand why they are. I mean, there was such a mix of the haves and the have nots at this school. I mean, there were celebrities' children that were full private pay. We were private pay because I had never gone to a public school and fought for the funding.
Right.
And then there were kids who would come from, you're a feeder from all sorts of different districts. But in any case, so I went to this school. So there was this kind of internal fight between, I'm finally with my people and I feel super normal and I'm learning and I'm reading and I ran for student council. And then also like, I'm not at Oakwood and I'm not with all these kids who are reading all the books and doing all the things. And I felt confused. I definitely felt very confused. But at the same time, I built self-esteem. Or like the first time in my life, I finally started to feel really good. So this continued fifth grade, sixth grade, seventh grade, eighth grade, lots of learning happening, lots of growth happening. When it came time for about 10th grade, everyone was kind of like, because the goal of an NPS or any alternate setting is to get you back to the mainstream, theoretically, right? Which is a little bit counterintuitive to a private school setting because a private school wants the funds, right? But an NPS wants to get you back into the mainstream.
Yeah, it's kind of like let's like get this child good enough so then they can go back, when ultimately, specifically for a dyslexic individual, it's not going anywhere. So
Yeah,
it's
right.
like can we band-aid this enough so you're not bleeding out and push you back in?
But my parents were prepared to do whatever to keep me there. But I was really into theater and acting. Also, a lot of the kids that I was going to school with at that time exhibited a lot of the behaviors that we see with middle and high school kids who struggle, right? A lot of drug use, a lot of partying, and it was such a small setting that like my friends were in every grade. I was not, just friends with the people who were in my grade. So my mom found LACHSA, LA County High School for the Arts, was like, do you want to try out? Do you want to try in mainstream in 10th grade and see if you can go study acting and be in school for 3 hours a day? And then most of the day is just going to be acting. I was like, yeah, I'll try that. So I get into this school. Wow, awesome. And I go. I am now in a full, it is though it's a magnet, it is a full public school. And I guess the laws had changed at this point because I had my testing. And so I get an IEP. And I have zero recollection of receiving any service whatsoever when I was there. But years later, I was going through paperwork and I found it in triplicate, how it used to be done. And there it was. I was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. So I struggled like nobody's business. Over winter break, I was supposed to read Jurassic Park, the biggest book like ever besides, War and Peace. And I was supposed to write a book report on Jurassic Park. I didn't do it. And I went back to school after winter break. I walked in to the class to face the teacher, tell her I hadn't done it. And for some reason, there were no seats left in the class. There was no desk for me to sit at. And I was just like, nope. And I walked out and I went to the office to the woman who was like my counselor. And I walked into her office and I was like, I can't do this anymore. I need to go back to Landmark. And she was like, what? And I was like, I can't do this. This is not, I can't do it. One of the gifts of being in that segregated setting is that I was taught about my brain and I was taught about how to advocate for myself and how to ask questions and that it was safe to ask questions. Because of that, I was able to walk in there. I called my old counselor at Landmark and I said, is there room for me? Oh. And Kathy is a colleague now to this day. And she said, yes, there is room for you. And when my mom picked me up that day from school, I said, I talked to Kathy, there's room for me. I cannot do this anymore. And I said, if it's okay with you guys, and if you can pull this off, I would really like to go back to Landmark, which held a bit of shame for me because remember that piece of going to Landmark where you felt kind of like stupid and there was cohesion in that. And when you finally got out, you were like, I'm out, like I did it, that kind of thing. And so when I left, there was this big, like, she's leaving. Oh my God, like blah, blah, blah. And so I had to swallow my pride a little bit, and I had struggled with that concept until finally I hit my wall and I was like, nope, I can't do this anymore.
The sadness of that moment, because even though I'm not dyslexic, I think that there's things in my life that resonate. But as a parent, me visualizing my child not only doing that, but that you had the wherewithal and the responsibility and the willingness to advocate for yourself so much that you called the school and you asked first to see if they had a spot to put you back. Like, I know it sounds silly, but that's the how, like the power to advocate for yourself like you needed to in that moment and know exactly what you needed. I think as a mom, I would have been really proud, like heartbroken that you had to go through that, but also just proud for you knowing who you were. I think that
right.
that there's power in that too. If you're going to find any silver lining,
So I went back, but everyone was like, okay, so let's do a little bit of they didn't say this, but now I can say it's like a little bit of an autopsy. Like what went wrong? Like what was the hardest part? Like what gaps do we need to fill right now? And it wasn't reading and it wasn't, yes, obviously I struggled with reading comprehension in a huge way, but that was, I guess, one of my accommodations that spelling wouldn't be, counted against me. But comprehension was still such a hard thing for me, but they knew that there was something else. And so I went back to Kitty and got retested and I was ADHD. Mm-hmm. And they had missed it all those years because I'm inattentive. As soon as we found that out, I started seeing an ed therapist that was closer to my school. And I did go on medication and everything changed after that. I know that doesn't happen for everyone. And I know that I see it always that like it's such a journey for so many families. It's a journey for me and my family. But I took Ritalin, short acting, and it worked. And all of a sudden, it was just a complete game changer. Everything that I had been taught all those years at Landmark and all the strategies, everything just kind of clicked. It was a complete game changer.
I'm so happy, Lainie, that you're saying that out loud, because I feel like the conversation about medication related to ADHD is so taboo, especially in our industry when ADHD is so common. And I mean, what I don't say out loud a lot of times is if you're going to invest the money into, working with somebody's specialized OG, this intervention that's so intense, you're kind of throwing good money at bad sometimes. And
Yes.
and I have 2 children where when medication, and I hesitated and I researched, and when that started, it changed their life.
Yes.
Like confidence came back, things clicked. They could show what they could do.
They could show up. They could
Yes.
show up in a way that like I couldn't show up before.
Mhm.
My brain did not allow me to show up in that way. And what I actually say to my families is, listen, I'm not here to tell you what to do. It is your family. You guys need to make choices for what is best for you. I feel like my job as a professional is to tell you what the research says and what I know to be true at this point in time. Could it change in a few years? I'm sure it could. But as far as we know, the best outcomes that we get with the ADHD brain is a combination of stimulant medication and some sort of behavioral intervention, whether that is ed therapy, reading intervention, cognitive behavioral therapy, something. It is not a pill. The pill is not a skill. And so even when you take the pill, it is not going to shift your frontal lobe and all of a sudden hand you some executive function skills. In fact, it's quite the opposite. You take the pill and then you realize how much you can't do and like how much you live in this gap between intention and follow through, right?
The pill is not a skill.
I know. I'm using
quoting
that. And I'm using that again.
Use it.
Let's make sure.
It is. It's just living in this gap of like, I'm going to do this, and we have all of our students who are like, I'm going to get a new planner and get it really pretty. And I'm going to get all of my pens and my mom's going to help me get my desk organized and everything's going to be fabulous. And there's the intention. And then after a week of that excitement and dopamine boost, it's gone and nothing happens. Right. So it was very helpful to understand that the medication worked. And I went to college and I remember I went to the University of Vermont and I applied early decision. And I remember getting in and my mom and I were just like, what? Like I get to go to college. And my business partner and I, Liz, we always talk about, because she went to Landmark East a couple years ahead of me. And we just happened to meet when we were both working at Summit View. And we always make this joke of like, our application must have gotten like paper clipped to someone else's and just wound up in that pile or something. I felt like, did I really earn this? And in any case, I went to college. And the funniest is that my phone in my freshman year dorm room was a fax machine.
Yeah.
And she bought my English tutor, who was my 9th and 10th grade English teacher, or 8th and 9th grade. And she was my writing, she would help me write, bought her a fax machine for her home in LA. And so that way we could fax papers back and forth so I could still get help.
I love that.
And yeah, we laugh about it to this day. And I have one little box left of schoolwork from college and things like that. And it's on fax paper. So it's all gone. You can see little, that fax paper didn't hold in for anyway.
And your mom's brilliant. She's so smart to buy you each a fax machine and just go back and forth. Brilliant.
Yep. Because we didn't have email or anything like that at that point. So I went to college and I got my first assignment in a freshman seminar course. And it was to read this article that was comparing Christianity, Buddhism, and Judaism. And you had to read it and then summarize it. And now as an educator, I understand that the skill of summarizing is one of the hardest skills, A, to teach, and B, to actually do, right?
Yeah.
Because picking out salient information, and especially for the ADHD brain and the dyslexic brain, it all feels very important. I, excuse my French, I lost my shit. I became hysterical, convinced I did not belong in college, that there was no version of me being able to do this, and called my mom. And I was like, you have to let me come home. I do not belong here. I can't do this work. It's just too much for me. It's way above my head. And she's like, that's not true. Let's get some resources. Call Lauren, who was my tutor at the time. And she's like, I could call you in a few hours, but I can't help you at this moment. And I can't remember if it was Lauren or my mom. One of them said, go see if there's someone on your floor who seems like they know what they're doing and just talk through the assignment with them. And I was like, I can't do that, blah, blah, blah. And I think it was Lauren, because she's like, you know what to do. You know what to say. You know how to advocate for yourself. You can do this. So I decided to go next door because this girl, Sarah, had a single, and she had gone to one of those very fancy boarding schools on the East Coast. She had a single and she listened to NPR, and she was 18. So I was like, this girl knows what she's doing. She listens to talk radio. Like, she's got to have a sense of, what she's doing. So I very sheepishly go next door. I went in there and I was like, hi. I remember feeling like so small and big at the same time, because it all just felt so heavy, but also I had to access skills that I have been learning since fifth grade to be able to say, I have a learning disability, but I'm really smart. I just need some help with this. And I just don't know where to begin. And she's like, yeah. I remember her being like, yeah, I'll help you. Like, she was kind of like, I don't know what the you want from me, but sure, I'll help you. And I was just internally shaking. So I take out my stuff and I start to show her what I was doing. And I start showing her my outline. And she literally looked at me and goes, what's an outline? And I was like, well, so you take the information you want to say and you organize it. And I proceeded to write my outline, showing her how to outline.
Mm-hmm.
And that is when it clicked for me. In my head, it was this superior education, right? Because she got all the presidents and the periodic table and the scarlet letter and, all the things, but I learned how.
Right.
And so I was all of a sudden like, wait a minute, I have a skill set that a lot of these people don't have. And how would she not know how to do an outline? But I know how to do an outline. And this feeling crept up many times, many, many more times, of course. So I finished the school year and I go home. My mom gets a letter in the mail and my mom goes, holy shit, you have a 4.0. And I was like, what is that? Is that good? Yeah,
Oh my
didn't.
gosh, that's so great.
I had no idea what a GPA was. Even I just didn't understand. And she got a letter from my counselor saying how impressed she was and how proud she was of me, the at student services, and wanted to congratulate me on that. And college turned out to be my jam. I worked harder than, I don't want to say harder than anyone. They all worked really hard. It just, what took them an hour took me 3 hours.
Right. You did.
Mhm.
You did, Lainie, work a lot harder than all those other people.
Right. For a lot of the same results, or maybe not the same results, but it took time. It took a huge amount of time. And there were many times every single semester where it was, why the hell do I have to do so much more than everyone else? Why do I always have to go to office hours? Why do I have to, it was a lot of that. But ultimately, it slowly just became my process. It just kind of became like second nature. It's just what I did to get through. And I don't say this to be boastful. It was more like humor. Like my mom and I just kept laughing. I graduated Phi Beta Kappa. And we just laughed our asses off at graduation. And there's this picture of the two of us hugging each other with this crying, laughing of what the just happened.
Talk to us about if you could only have our listeners hear you say one thing, what piece of advice do you really want our families that are going through the struggle right now to know?
I want families to understand that not every educational journey looks exactly the same, and that's okay. I know as parents, when we give birth to our children, we have this idea of how things are going to go. And I think we have to do better at being open to veering every which way and meeting our kids where they are to get them to where they need to be. We rely on our teachers, and our teachers don't always know. Trust your gut as a parent that if you feel like something isn't right, something isn't going well, and you're being, as they say these days, gaslit, go somewhere else and get a different answer, or get someone who knows more. Reach out to Eryn, reach out to Megan, find the resources. If my mom in the early 80s could find some resources without the internet, right? Then you can do it too, even though it's so hard. I am a professional in the field and I struggle with meeting the needs of my children. And so I have to search out the resources. So just be open to an alternative path and be willing to do some of the legwork, even though it's really hard. Don't hide it from your kid, because your kid knows. Your kid knows exactly what's going on. Do not tell them that they're taking vitamins. Tell them exactly what they're doing. Give them the information. Empower them to know who they are, and they can educate some other people, right? I think that having those conversations and making it part of your family culture, it doesn't have to be everything, but just making it part of the family culture normalizes it. And just
100%.
becomes like, it's just part of who we are, right? Like some people wear glasses,
Right.
some people have to wear, insoles in their shoes to help their feet. I have to get help for reading. It's just one more thing that makes us different and also kind of awesome.
And that's what this whole podcast is all about, is like talking about the struggle in the journey. I mean, every single person that we have interviewed at this point has said if they could craft their life again, they would be dyslexic, because there was a silver lining at the end. And I think that that's so important for parents to take away when they're in the thick of it and they're in the tears with their child and all of that, that there is something to be said at the end. Like it ends up being something really pivotal for that person.
Because you're in the high school college space, is there a particular kind of tool that you want to bring to light that you feel the majority of the kiddos that you support
Yeah.
use?
College is all about time management. Time management is something that dyslexics and people with ADHD profoundly struggle with. And so my business partner and I did develop this academic planner that essentially has all the elements that the other academic planners don't have. Now, neither of us would say, like, buy this and then you'll be good. It takes training and it takes time and it takes habit building. And so I think learning how to use the planner and making it part of your daily life is critical. The data is in. We know, research has told us that analog is the way to go. There are digital assistive pieces that are critical to my life, but we do know that things become ingrained in your neural pathways in a very different way when it is written by your own hand than when it is put on a screen. I really feel like the tool that we created has been serving students in an incredible way. The goal is, like, you have to look at a student as a whole person. They're not just a student. So you need to be able to take into account what else is happening throughout a day. Also, who do you need to meet with? What do you need to prepare for? It is leveling the playing field. That is all this is. It is equity versus equality. We don't need equality. We need equity. Everyone get what they need to succeed.
Mhm.
And that's it.
I just want to thank you for being so vulnerable today, sharing your story with us. And we will put all the links to everything you've mentioned about the great stuff you're providing to the community in the show notes. And thank you so much.
I want to say thank you so much. You guys, the work that you're doing is so critical. And I'm just so grateful that you both are part of this community doing the work all over the place. And I loved talking to you guys today. And I really appreciate everything that you're doing.
Today's episode is sponsored by Advocate to Educate. We help parents navigate through the confusing maze of special education in public schools in California. We support families starting as early as preschool through 12th grade, creating individual education plans to support the specific needs of your unique and amazing child. To learn more, go to our website, advocate2educate.com.
Today's episode is sponsored by Dyslexia On Demand. Dyslexia On Demand uses only the highest trained dyslexia therapists, and it's all one-on-one and individualized to your child's needs. The best part is that it doesn't matter where you're located because it's all virtual. Visit us at dyslexiaondemand.com to learn more. We're glad you tuned in today. To continue the conversation and be a part of our growing community, follow us on our social media channels and YouTube. Visit don'tcallonme.com to share your experiences and learn from others. Every story shared is a step toward greater awareness and inclusivity. Join us in making a difference and don't miss our next enlightening episode.